Government of Botswana has lost the legal attempt to overturn a landmark ruling that decriminalized homosexuality in 2019. The country's High Court ruled in favor of campaigners seeking to strike down jail sentences for persons in same-sex relationships, declaring the punishment to be unconstitutional. But the government sought to revoke the ruling, arguing that the courts had no jurisdiction over this matter. Joining me now to talk about this is Transworks Global Gender Diversity Chairperson, Sia Hlonga. Sia, good to have you with us tonight on In Focus. It has been, of course, a challenge, and this time around the court's ruling in your favor. What does this mean for your work in particular on gender equity and diversity within the country of Botswana?
So the fantastic thing is that since 2019, the actual ruling was that our community could actually get married in Botswana, and same-sex marriage could happen, and people could actually engage in same-sex relations in terms of intimacy without being persecuted in any way. But of course, the government in Botswana challenged this, and of course wanted to overturn the High Court ruling. But fortunately, we actually finally got the confirmation today that in fact this is now legalized and recognized before the eyes of the law. And this is obviously the Constitutional Court that affirmed this. So going forward, it means that, more people can actually stay in Botswana and not have to, immigrate to other countries in order for them to consummate their relationships and begin, sort of being legally recognized, so to speak, in marital relations. And I think for my work specifically as well, it means that it's a new chapter of being able to now speak to, sort of challenging, privileges for couples to be able to adopt children going forward, and also challenging maybe the preconceived notions around what marriage is, and starting to, stimulate conversations around representation of what marriage and union is in terms of recognition before the eyes of the law to the general public, to change perceptions and start creating more inclusive and diverse perspectives in the community.
Is it just fear of arrest that the LGBTIQ plus community in Botswana has been living under, or have arrests actually been effected based on this law?
Well, like in the work that I do, I just provide sensitization. And I would say that, because of the fact that it was illegal prior to 2019, arrests would be, eligible in terms of sort of it being illegal for people to actually get married. But I would say going forward now, the government has no jurisdiction to do that going forward. They have to recognize same-sex couples before the eyes of the law. I would say that now the premise now is just to change the perspectives around the community itself. I would say that the law and the Constitution itself is the highest form of rule, and the public perception comes secondary. So I would say that even though the environment is not conducive at the moment, we want to start challenging the preconceived notions and start having more workshops around this for organizations in Botswana to start having a more inclusive and I would say, aware stance as far as the legal jurisdiction now with the new ruling supporting our same-sex marriages in Africa, on the African continent, specifically active in Botswana.
Yeah. That would have been the next question that I wanted to put to you, that entire question of the public acceptance of this particular ruling. Do you think this will have an overwhelming acceptance amongst the population in Botswana?
Unfortunately, I mean, on the African continent, there are a lot of sort of mixed perceptions and misunderstandings around what union is, what civil unions, what marriages are, because of, sort of religious and pre-colonial misconceptions that actually sort of gave birth to these sort of current phobic, transphobic, LGBTQ phobic, queer phobic stances on civil unions and same-sex marriages. I would say that these are the danger that couples do face now in sort of, getting married going forward. we do see, obviously, probably attitudes and also some pastors maybe wanting to, sort of relegate the responsibility of marrying these couples to others. But obviously, with the Constitution allowing this to happen, it means that now there is that option available to those that do have the means to actually get married and also do that in a safe environment in suburbs and areas that are more awakened to what it means to be a same-sex couple without discriminating in any way.
Yeah, the 5 judges unanimously agreeing that those sections of the penal code have outlived their usefulness and serve only to incentivize law enforcement agents to become keyhole peepers and intruders into the private space of citizens. Except for those penal codes being removed, is there anything else that the LGBTIQ plus community will be pushing for to be included as part of the laws and policies in the country?
I would say that we're not alone in this journey. We're very fortunate that we've got multilateral organizations that we work with. I mean, I myself am primarily based in South Africa, but I'm very fortunate to be part of a global community of the LGBTQI, and we do get together in conferences and workshops, and we do strategize about what we actually want together as a collective of organizations on the African continent and broader to speak to global issues as well. What do we want? What's on the table as far as the kind of change and inclusivity that we look for? I mean, I would say there are a couple of things, like I mentioned, access to adoption, being able to adopt children now legally without any, issues or any discrimination, to people in civil unions within the LGBTQIA+, and also to be able to now openly declare that you are married in public spaces and have the public displays of affection. I mean, there are a lot of sort of, preconceived issues around what representation of civil union and marriage is, and these need to be changed. So I would say sensitization programs are key, and the kinds of changes that are really critical would be, to maybe, number one, put together a policy around what it looks like to punish behaviors or discriminations that do come forward, but also sensitization programs as well that would stimulate more inclusive behavior from the general public. But last but not least, also to sensitize these adoption agencies and state organs that are responsible for this, so that our community can also have access to having a whole family and adopt children if they so wish.
Yeah, you mentioned the assistance that you get from other comrades around the continent of Africa and elsewhere in the world. How useful is this judgment going to be, particularly for those countries? You know, there are a number of countries in Africa where homosexuality is still illegal.
I would say, I mean, South Africa seems to always have the first foot forward in terms of opening up the conversation, in terms of introducing some of these flagship policies and legal frameworks in order to instill and also enforce the dignity and equality of all people in the nation. And this obviously now trickles to other countries in more cases than not. Unfortunately, not all countries have recognized this. And in fact, today there was a hearing in Ghana where they were discussing, their sort of anti-LGBTQIA laws that they've prescribed and questioning some of these policies put forward. I would say that this ruling, or rather this appeal being overturned, is a step in the right direction in terms of sending out a message that irrespective of whatever religious background, whatever stance you have as far as what other people are doing, we all deserve access to dignity, to be able to love someone and to be able to live with the person you love without experiencing any form of affliction. And I would say that that's probably one of the issues that are the source of the challenges we have on the African continent, is not focusing on the correct things. We should be fighting terrorism. We should be fighting poverty. We should be fighting for inclusion and access for even poor communities, etc. We shouldn't be fighting people being able to love each other in dignity.
Sia, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on In Focus. Sia Hlongwa of Transworks Global, Gender Diversity Chairperson there.